The Chinese Communist Party has fiercely assaulted the American judicial system while most Americans slept. The 5-year legal battle between Pax and Miles Guo goes far beyond an ordinary debt collection and becomes a battleground for defending American justice free from the CCP's interference. Protecting Americans' judicial independence is the responsibility of the American people. We are the new Chinese who are taking down the CCP, and we're here to help. The plaintiff and creditor, PAX, Pacific Alliance Asia Opportunity Fund, is a subsidiary of PAG, Pacific Alliance Group, headed by Shan Weijian, a CCP-registered spy with a public persona of a successful venture capitalist and a seasoned executive. Representing PAX is the international law firm O'Melveny, one of the first U.S. law firms to set up in Communist China, and was just awarded a top practice in Communist China in June 2022.
The defendant, debtor Miles Guo, the seventh son of a poor rural family with 8 boys. At age 13, he's already made fortunes with his various business adventures. At age 19, he was persecuted by the CCP for providing financial aid to the 1989 June 4th student movement, but survived the 22 months torture at the Qingfeng Detention Center. In 2015, he fled China and started the whistleblower movement in 2017. Mr. Guo's truth-telling broadcastings have awakened hundreds of millions of Chinese from the mind-controlling spells the CCP has cast on its people and the world. Hence, he became the most formidable enemy of the CCP.
Let's start with the scandalous incident that occurred most recently in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court District of Connecticut. On June 15, 2022, the court issued a memorandum of decision granting the United States trustee UST's motion for the appointment of a Chapter 11 trustee. 15 days later, on June 30, 2022, the UST filed a notice appointing Joe D. Whitley as Chapter 11 trustee and an application for seeking the court's approval of the appointment of Whitley as Chapter 11 trustee. On July 5, 2022, the day of the scheduled hearing of Whitley's appointment, UST notified the court that it would withdraw the application for the appointment of Whitley as the Chapter 11 trustee. What was supposed to be an appointment hearing of Whitley becomes a heated 39-minute debate between the judge and the UST on if the UST should have followed the procedure outlined in the Bankruptcy Code in removing Whitley, who at the time of this hearing had signed an affidavit under penalty of perjury declaring his disinterestedness. Despite the judge's inquiry, the UST attorney Holly Claiborne asserted that the UST has the governmental privilege and does not need to discuss or explain how the UST selects a trustee. Nevertheless, Claiborne emphasized the need for the UST to select and install an individual who can be impartial to all parties in the July 5th hearing. Only 2 days later, on July 7, 2022, the UST filed a notice appointing Luke A. Despens, a partner at Paul Hastings LLP, as Chapter 11 trustee, and an application seeking the court's approval of the appointment. Like O'Melveny, Paul Hastings has a significant and active presence in Communist China. Upon obtaining this news, Mr. Guo posted on Getter on the same day, stating that Paul Hastings is a long-term partner of PEG, the plaintiff PEG's parent company in China, and Luke A. Despens is not a disinterested person. This news rattled many followers of the whistleblower movement, who shortly after Miles' post located a shocking amount of evidence online about the close tie Paul Hastings has with PAG and the Chinese Communist Party. The next day, July 8, 2022, Luke A. Despens attended the hearing of his appointment and conveniently told the judge his earlier admission, Paul Hastings' representation of PAG-PEG. The followers of the whistleblower movement were furious at the time, and they turned their emotions into actions. They dug deeply into this matter and exposed more findings on social media. Probably under pressure, on July 12, 2022, Luke A. Despens filed his first supplemental declaration of disinterestedness, in which he declared that Paul Hastings represented certain entities that share a common parent with PAX. He did not disclose any details regarding those representations, other than to state that they were in unrelated matters. Why did the UST approach the two trustees, Whitley and Despens, differently? In Whitley's case, the UST perceived the purported conflict and immediately withdrew Whitley, ignoring the removal process outlined in the Bankruptcy Code, as well as the fact Whitley and his firm were not directly involved in the conflict. In Despens' case, the late rising conflict relates to the PAC's parent company, PEG, and the UST moved forward with the appointment at lightning speed. Not to mention that the UST willfully ignored the undue influence that the Chinese government maintains over Paul Hastings by controlling its ability to do business in China and Hong Kong. Why did the UST hastily select the second trustee in just 2 days? Why it failed its first decision, made over 15 days from June 15th to 30th. In the next episode, we will share critical information about this case and the CCP's presence and interference in the American judicial system so you can get closer to the bottom of these questions. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the show. And my name is Rachel. Today will be just me in the live broadcasting room. My partner, Jenny, she will be busy for a little while. And therefore, it will be me and Casey. And Casey is today's OBS support. So thank you, Casey. And thank you, the audiences in the room. So we have lots to talk about it, particularly the CCP kleptocrats and their activities in the past few years. And also in this episode, I would talk about the second missing witness in Miles Guo versus Pax case. So let's tune into the first slides. January 26, 2017 is a very special day. The reason I say it is because that's the day that the fate of the 1.4 billion Chinese people has officially changed forever. Because that day, Miles Guo accepted an interview from the Mirror Media Group and officially kicking off what we called a whistleblower movement. Because the State Security Bureau chose to set up an unofficial office at Miles's 7-star Pangu Hotel in China, Miles developed a special relationship with the former Deputy Minister of State Security, Mr. Ma Jian. So he shared those information in the very first whistleblowing live streaming interview with the Mirror Media Group. And in the same interview, Miles told the world that he actually possessed evidence of criminal activities of the top CCP officials, including embezzlement of trillions of public money. Okay, that's huge. And once that news came out, everything changed. So as a result, these kleptocrats were scared and they consider Miles their number one threat who needs to be silenced and eliminated. That's exactly what they did to Miles in the last over 5 years. So to do this, they resorted to their usual tactics of framing and accusing someone of wrongdoing. And the kleptocrats summon the most critical state apparatus we know today. That one is the propaganda machine, and the other one is judicial system. As we introduced in our previous episode, there's no rule of law. There's only rule by law. And who is the law? The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is the law and sets the law. Therefore, they're above the law. So basically, the most corrupted leaders in the world call for anti-corruption. It's quite absurd, but that's the story involved in the 5.5 years of whistleblower movement. So the reason why I want to share this with you is because I think it's closely tied to the cases that we're seeing today, which is, it's being already 5-year marathon. That's the legal case that Pax has against Miles Guo. Because we know that the dictatorship, they only thrive when they stop the free flow of information. So they bar their people from knowing the truth. And people who breathe those propaganda and fake information 24/7 in a communist regime are easily fooled. That is why still a lot of Chinese people are not waking up. Although we've, promising after 5.5 years, we've seen hundreds of millions of Chinese are waking up. But I think those wake-up call not only needs to be rang at in Chinese people, but should bring to the world, because what we are experiencing, regardless whether economic disaster or whether, the pandemic, anything along with it, it's actually all rooted from this evil regime, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. So before we dive into the detail of the case, I really want to give you a kind of a 101 on the Chinese kleptocrats and the kleptocracy that we find in China, what they look like. And so you will more easily relate to the rest of the information that I'm going to share with you in the show. So thank you, Casey, for tuning into the slides. So we see that China, in the big map of China, the dictatorship, but they are not legitimate government. The people has no rights, have no votes. They're not elected. Basically, the National Congress, those conference, those votes that you see, they aired on the CCP's propaganda. They're all fake. Basically, they're just for a show to deceive their people. But reality is, the country is belong to just a handful of kleptocrats and their families, their extended family, like their mistress, their illegitimate sons, those families. And according to Miles's whistleblowing, and roughly about 100 families basically control all the resources of the entire nation. But among all those 100 families, there are 3 major political factions or camps, if you so call. So I listed the 3 of them on the screen. Of course, there are more because each faction has sub-factions, and sub-factions could have their own network. But basically, on the top, there is Jiang. Jiang is previous president and the leaders of the Communist Party. And Zheng is also one of the top recruits of Jiang's faction. And also Wang Qishan, which is the vice president of China, used to be vice president of China. So they, 3 of them are PAC. So they are belong to the Jiang Zhen faction. And the second faction, of course, is the current leader of the Communist Party, Xi. So XI. So he is he doesn't have a very deep roots, according to the people coming from within the CCP. They don't regard Xi has a lot of deep roots connected politically. So she is a kind of a new child, a very green person coming to the game. And so the Jiang and Zhen faction trying to view him as a puppet. So they tried everything to control Xi, but they failed. So this is why, on the surface, it belongs to a Communist Party. They all brush them away as a member of the Communist Party, but all of them, if you look closely, they all fighting for power, because in a dictatorship, who wouldn't? All you have is a people that quest for power, and they struggle, they kill, and be killed, and, fight every day for maintain or get more power. So that's basically how the system is set up. And the last faction is the Communist Youth League faction. So that was a previous president Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao, vice premier. So basically, these are 3 camps. So this is a very basic 101. We will not dive into details in terms of their struggles and networks, but just give you a basic concept, because that's not the focus of the program. So move on to the next slides. So the next slides, I want to give you another glossary, that vocabulary that every Chinese probably know. Every Chinese knows. The vocabulary is called white gloves. It's a word describing people you see on the screen, and of course not just these 7 of them. There's a tons of them out there, but I just use them as example, because some of them you may, even for the Western audience, you may have heard. So we call those people white gloves. The reason why is they are public figures. They're known to a lot of people. They're very successful. Could be an investor, could be a businessman. They enlisted on the world of Forbes, most richest man in the world. Many of them hit the top 300. So on the picture, let's take a look at the picture. So a lot of you notice on the top, there is a gentleman wearing white shirt, a white t-shirt. And his name is Jack Ma. And I think a lot of you probably familiar with Alibaba, so you would know who is Jack Ma. So he is very successful. He was, actually, I should say, but now he had lost his freedom, and he kind of not so much in the public eyes anymore. There's a reason behind it. But these people, we all refer them to as the white gloves. The reason why is if the country are divided between a few kleptocrats or 100, let's say 100, maybe there's 7 of them on the top and the rest of them are sub-factions, and they are public officials, right? They're government, on the surface, they're government officials. So they couldn't do a lot of things themselves. So they need a agent, a proxies to safely do those things that is probably not ethical or legal, legally to be done within their position. So they have to recruit or they have to cultivate. So this is where the cultivate part comes in, because as you know, in order to, because Chinese is China, the CCP-controlled China has a lot of spies and working for the foreign affair, but it's basically intelligence offices, and they help maintain the legitimacy of this CCP government. So depending on which where you come from, if you're recruited directly, then you're more likely not a registered spy. But if you're cultivated very young age, even a teenage age, then you're most likely to be a registered spy in the regime. So on this picture, 7 of them, the bottom 3 are actually registered special agents. These are actually, if one day all the internal documents that showed up and exposed to the external, you will see that their names are there. So they're trained and cultivated from very early on. But the top 4 people, most of them are coming from mainland China, and then they went to Hong Kong. So we will actually introduce a person in this. We will mention a particularly history for one of the person in the picture on the top. But the white gloves, basically, the purpose is to launder money for those CCP kleptocrats and their family. So they want to steal the wealth from the Chinese people, and they want to ship it to somewhere safe. So they need successful business person. Or, a lot of those gentlemen are equity investors. They're into those complicated financial schemes. Well, the reason is they are CCP's white gloves, and they help them to transfer monies illegally and hold the money, because a lot of the money, they can be traced back to whoever really owns the money. So they become a proxy. Okay, so let's move on. So I want to mention one person in this particular picture, and his name is Zhang Songqiao. So Zhang Songqiao is here. There's a lot. You might not familiar with this name if you're living in the United States, but if you're living in London, you may come across a report on the Guardians, the report on Guardians that back in 2014 and 2021, there's 2 reports about him that purchased the very expensive, I would say, landmark buildings in London. One of them is called a cheese grater. The shape of the building looks like a cheese grater, so that's why they call it cheese grater. And I think that I can find, let me just hold on a second, because I'm, the cheese grater costs how much money? I can see it on the report. It's a little bit too small for me, the fine prints, but it was over 1.2 billion UK pounds. So you can imagine how much money it's actually cost to buy this properties. And then on the pictures next to it, it was a building that right between the Buckingham Place, I think it was belonged to the former royal family or something. It was a 7-story buildings, and Zhang Songqiao purchased it for a gazillion amount of dollars. And again, this made headlines in local newspaper. So why a person you never heard of it actually, purchasing so much properties in British in London, and not just to him, all the gentlemen on the pictures. On the previous slides, they all did. They all did. Jack Ma did. The Joseph Liu did, who is a Hong Kong tycoon and businessman, and chairman of the real estate development. So all of them did. They look like they are successful on the surface, but they are definitely, without the CCP corrupted system, they could not be that successful for sure. So, so that's the deception that the CCP, the kleptocrats regime has basically weaved on the surface for the people. So although they're successful, they're taking the risk because they're working for the CCP. When they are useful, they are being summoned because they can help the CCP to hide and the wealth and to steal the wealth. But when they become redundant, or the CCP or their masters needs a scapegoat, then basically they're in danger. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slides. I kind of just wanted to see what the next one I want to share. Okay, so right now I want to share one of the report that I find online, and this one is actually from the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission. As I mentioned, Miles started whistleblowing on January 26, 2017, and the kleptocrats are scared because all they have trying to do is to conceal the truth. Because Miles is blowing up all those kleptocrats and their white gloves and telling the world how actually they, embezzled trillions of public money, not millions, billions, they're trillions. So the country is hollowed out because of those kleptocrats and their white gloves. So he is basically telling the world the truth. And that is why he is become the most formidable enemy of the CCP. Hence, he has to be silenced. And this report that's submitted in 2017 November to Congress from the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Committee, this report is actually well done, I would have to say. Whoever collected the information is pretty thorough, but I still pointed out they missed quite a bit thing, but I will later on show in the show, we will talk about that. But I want to give everyone, an audience, a brief rundown of what the events they collect in 2017 that seems very, very suspicious. Okay, so we know that Miles School started in January. So what happened to the rest of the what happened to the rest of the 2017? So let's take a look. And by the way, the report showing on the screen, there's a barcode, the QR code attached to it. So if you want to read it for yourself, you definitely can just read it online by scanning the QR code. So the first events I wanted to review with you is in March 2017, according to the report. The China-run state media called Miles a criminal suspect. Okay, and launched an international publicity campaign against Miles, including releasing a videotaped confession by Miles' friend, Mr. Ma Jian. As I mentioned, he was the former Deputy Minister of State Security. So in this online video, you can still find it on YouTube if you want to search it. And Mr. Ma accused Mr. Guo of corruption and uploaded the videos to YouTube on the Truth About Guo Wengui channel to discredit him, his reputation. So just let you know, although the report recorded this channel, but the channel is no longer existed today. But the video still can be seen on website. Even I think Miles School has kept a video of that, just to showing how the campaign was done. That in last episode, in the previous two episodes, we talked about confession. We talked about televised confession. Is a feature of the Chinese rule by law, right? We reviewed the first missing witness, Chu Guojiao, in Miles's case against PAX. And we also mentioned about the Causeway bookstore, which it was a big event. 5 booksellers was disappeared, and then later on appeared on the televised confession in the CCTV, which is a state-owned media controlled by the CCP. So you can tell these televised confession are a staged production, particularly done by, orchestrated and arranged by the CCP to hurt the person they wanted to hurt. Okay, so in this particular video, Mr. Ma accused of Mr. Guo of corruption. Okay, so you can tell why they wanted to air this video, why they made the video first, why they forced Mr. Ma Jian to confess when there is nothing, and when they use their propaganda machine to widely distribute this video because they wanted people to know that message. So back to the report. Okay, again, this U.S. Congress report. So after Miles threatened to drop a nuclear bomb of corruption allegations involving relatives of powerful CCP official in April 2017, so Miles went on his whistleblowing activities. He started in January 26th, and then he keep going. In March, he had another live stream, actually two, I think, or maybe even three. I could be wrong. I can't remember. But if you go on to the YouTube channel, look at the Miles's channel, and you subscribe it, you can see all the historical live streaming that he whistleblowed on the YouTube. So in April, Miles threatened to drop a bunch of information related to the corruption allegations involving the relatives of top CCP officials, and then the Chinese government started pressure the International Criminal Police Organization (Interpol) to issue a red notice for Miles Guo. Okay, and in the previous show, if you remember, in the first show, we've talked about the circumstances, the particular two events that happened around the complaint of this PACS lawsuits against Miles, because that case was brought to the New York Supreme Court on 2017, April 18th, the same day that the foreign minister of China announced that the Interpol has issued a red notice for Miles Guo, calling him a criminal suspect, if you recall that. Okay, so here I have a news report. This is a foreign policy, so FP. It was published on April 21st, 2017. So according to this report, so Meng Hongwei, a former Chinese vice minister of public security, has been president of Interpol since November 2016. Okay, so according to the FP's Bethany Allen Abrahamia, I'm not sure I say her last name correctly, but sorry if I pronounced it incorrectly, but she said in this article, so countries such as Russia, Turkey, and China issue politically motivated red notice against the dissidents' activities and journalists. And she argues that the timing in this case suggests that China's motive is purely political, and the Interpol is in danger of becoming an extension of the increasingly long reach of the Chinese state. Okay, so in August, in AP Associated Press, another report down in August 31st, 2017, excuse me, the Associated Press reported that the Chinese police had requested a second Interpol arrest notice for Mr. Guo for this rape allegation. It's still a mystery because this person who claimed that she has been raped repeatedly by Miles Guo has never appeared in the court to do deposition in the last almost more than 5 years actually. So she agreed maybe 100 times, but she never showed up. Because and if you look at the complaint itself, and if you compare with other rape case complaints, you were seeing that her rape complaints a lack of details, grossly lacking of details. So maybe she knows she couldn't actually lie, in front of the lawyer's deposition. So she better just not show up. But anyway, Chinese social media mentioned of the story in April were heavily censored. And any story about, real story about Miles Guo was heavily censored in April. According to the Chinese Free Weibo, Weibo is a blogging, social media blogging, a site that tracks censored posts on Weibo, listed Mr. Guo as the top censored subject in the week prior to April 20th, 2017. You figure, why is that? And then New York Times report, April 21st. All those reports I'm mentioning is mentioned in the report that's submitted to the Congress in 2017 by the U.S.-China Security and Economic Review Committee. Okay, so Mr. Guo's Facebook and Twitter accounts were briefly suspended, and raising concerns of pressure by Chinese officials. Great Fire and censorship activism organization claimed the Chinese government had targeted Ms. Guo's Twitter account with a direct denial of service DDoS attack. And then again, this famous April 19 events, which we talked about in our first episode, again, the Voice of America, the Chinese Language Services conducted a live interview with Mr. Guo in which he made new allegations of corruption involving a very powerful party officials, Wang Qishan. Remember, he's one of the faction. He's a kleptocrat in one of the first faction that I mentioned in earlier of this program. So although the interview was advertised beforehand as scheduled to run for 3 hours, but VOA abruptly cut off the interview only after an hour, just right before Mr. Guo about to expose the criminal activities committed by the vice president at the time, Wang Qishan. Can you imagine that? And VOA is a publicly funded radio station by using American taxpayers' money. And CCP is basically, control it by calling it off and cut Miles right in the middle. Not even in the middle, because it's only 1 hour passing the 3 hours time mark. So, and then on June 10th, Wall Street Journal, okay, another article, the Chinese government began trying associates of Mr. Guo in June. Okay, so that now they're not only after Miles Guo, they're after Miles Guo's colleagues, family members, acquaintance. So making the first official allegations made ever in June. So they're accusing the 3 employees, former employees of Mr. Guo, committed a criminal offense. So according to the Wall Street Journal, the authorities, quote, went to unusual lengths to open the proceedings to public views by posting videos of the proceedings in addition to transcripts. Okay, so just give you a background knowledge. So judicial system in China is usually pretty closed. Not only you will not see the transcript of a particular hearing, a proceeding, or trial that's going on, and you will never see the video of proceedings, only if the Chinese government wants you to see. Okay, only if they want you to see. So this is a very, very deviant behavior. This is not normal. So for you living in a Western democratic society, you think this is probably normal. But in China, it is not, because everything is so opaque. They cover it. They don't want you to know. But in this particular cases, in Miles Guo's case, they want everyone to know. You have to question why. So, and not only that, they emphasizing the degrees to which the publicity campaign remained in full force. So basically, they're telling everybody what the CCP, what the kleptocrats is doing. Okay, they're not only retaliating, they tried everything, not only come after Miles, but come after his family. And according to Miles's whistleblower, earlier in 2017, or when he mentioned the things happened to him in 2015 and 16, because Miles fled to United States in 2015, left communist China. So his family is still there. His wife and daughter. So his daughter was captured twice by the CCP kleptocrats. Okay, so they put her into detention center twice. Okay, and they beat the employees who work in Pangu hotels. They torture them, and they're doing it daily. So basically, they send a team and with dozens of secret state police to the Pangu hotel, and every day they just summon their employees to the secret offices and beating them and torture them, and they do it for fun. Why are they doing that? Because they want to send message to Miles Guo and ask him to stop whistleblowing. If you do not stop, we will torture the things you love, the people you love, and the people you care. So basically, that's the message sent to Miles Guo loud and clear. Okay, so the 3 employees of Beijing Pangu Investment, one of the Miss Guo's companies, was convicted of fraud. They had to say in the court that they were forced by Miles Guo to commit the crime. So basically, they're implicating Miles Guo. So remember the video from self-confession video from Ma Jian, point the finger to Guo. Now the 3 former employee of Pangu Investment Company, which is Guo's company, point finger to Guo, and the CCPs air them everywhere and want everybody to know. Okay, so remember that. And more stories still comes. So New York Times, October 1st, later in September, okay, Mr. Guo post additional personal details of Chinese officials on Facebook. Then what does the company do? The company blocked his profile and an associated page due to violation of its term of service. That sounds really familiar because my account has been blocked by Twitter and permanently disabled by Twitter twice, citing the same thing when I'm just merely telling the truth. And this is information according to the Facebook spokesperson. And then continue. In the late September, so this is, you probably already know because we mentioned this earlier in previous episodes. So in late September, the Hedison Institute, a think tank in Washington, D.C., announced plans to host Mr. Guo for an invitation-only speaking event in early October. The date is October 4th. But the event was abruptly postponed the day before. Okay, so on October 3rd, they notified Mr. Guo and telling him that this events will be postponed. They didn't say cancel. They never say cancel, but the events never happened. So you figure it's basically canceled for forever. So according to the Wall Street Journal and Mr. Guo, Hedison Institute staff, including at least one scholar with a pending visa application for a trip to China, received telephone calls from the Chinese embassy, pressured them not to go through with the event. So Mr. David Tao, who was at the time a director of public affairs at the Hedison Institute, told the commission the events was postponed not due to pressure from Beijing, of course, official, spokesperson, but because Hedison staff wasn't able to pull together the event on short notice. Well, this is well pre-organized, but suddenly on the last day and say we're not able to pull it together, you figure what the reason is. And citing complications such as the need for heavy security. Okay, so that's David Tao, official statement produced. But according to internal Hedison Institute emails, internal emails reviewed by the commission, at least two senior Hedison staff said they received telephone calls from the Chinese embassy. And one senior fellow said a Chinese consular from the embassy called about, this is quote, directly quote, called about the senior fellow's entry visa application to China. Quote, the consular claimed hosting Mr. Guo would, quote, embarrass the Hedison Institute and hurt ties with the Chinese government, quote. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, so I would have to say this report that done by the U.S.-China Security and Economic Committee is pretty thorough. It keeps a fair record of some significant events happened after January 26, 2017. But I have to say it's far short of the complete tally because that year, many things happened to Miles Guo. And if you look at Miles Guo's live streaming broadcasting, you will know his life was on a thread. He was assassinated. There's multiple assassin attempts. And it was a very dangerous year for Miles. But I want to tie in everything for you. Aside from the disinformation spread via the Chinese state-controlled media that accuses Miles of numerous alleged crimes, from fraud to rape to double agents, whatever you name it, these scared kleptocrats use a state apparatus to imprison or disappear Miles's former employees, associates, and even family members, and seizing all records relating to business operations and freezing his assets. Okay, so, but the one thing this report missed, I think it's a very critical thing that missed, and the thing is still lingering on to the present time, is the PACS case. Okay, but I'm not blaming the commission omitted, because why would they? Why were they picking up? In the previous show and episodes, we introduced, we talk about the concept of unrestricted warfare. The scary part is they are not only using one venue, one kind of a weapon to attack United States or attack an individual. They're using a combination of tools. That is why Christopher Wray, the FBI director, in his 2020 speech, he mentioned about the Chinese government, the communist government are using all tools in all sectors. So this is why it's scary part. But we can see those a combination of tools has been used to take out Miles Guo by these scared kleptocrats. So this is leading back to our case today. Okay, I wanted to draw a connection for you because a lot of them do. You see those media propaganda campaigns and operations to smear Miles's reputation, but you don't necessarily connect the Pax case with the political persecution coming from the CCP's kleptocrats that aiming to silence or eliminate Miles Guo. So I wanted to connect it with you because in CCP, they have a three-step formula to eliminate any threats. Okay, so this is well tested and well used, well warmed tactics of the CCP. And I wanted to talk about who are they, so you would have a more understanding looking at Pax case. Okay, so CCP, the three-step formula is the first of one is a freeze and confiscate one's money. Okay, so in the previous media report, we already know that the CCP came after the very first thing is they made up some excuses and then calling Miles Guo a criminal suspect. Okay, and then they start using their rule by law, their corrupted judicial system, and to give to sentence Miles. For millions of frauds, and not only Miles himself, but also his employees, and asking people to implicate Miles for fraud and etc. Those illegal activities. So then they could actually sentence him and freezing his assets. Okay, so this is the very first thing they did. So Miles lost 60 billion Chinese assets. And I think one of the report done by Freedom Beacon, we don't have it here. They mentioned the number of 17 billion US dollars was freezed by the CCP using so-called using the two-system apparatus, which is propaganda, fake information, and judicial corruptions. Okay, and then the second tactics they often use is scaled off and disappear people who have a relationship, okay, to the person that they're trying to isolate, in this case, which is Miles Guo. So in last episode, we talk about the disappearing witness, the kidnapped Qu Guojiao, which is a very important witness in this case between Pac and Miles. She's gone and she's nowhere to be found and nobody knows her whereabouts, but her televised confessed video surfaced on internet in 2019 November, okay, implicating Miles's fraud and talking about Miles purchasing luxury yachts and luxury apartment, okay? And that evidence was just the evidence that Pax needed in order to, later on, I will show you why they need that information to implicate Miles in their lawsuit and a trial proceeding. So they're trying to scare off, they're trying to disappear, they warned them, just like they called those 3 employees. They want those employees to implicate Miles Guo, the same tactics. They were threatening them, you coerce them, the CCP coerced them and beat them, or disappears you. So these are very scary tactics. So these are the CCP formula to eliminate. These are second formula. So isolate the person, because after all, if you don't have a relationship, because everybody, we all understand, we need friends, right? When you need help, the friends could lend you money, the friends could point to the right contact, help you to solve some problem. So we need friends. But when you isolate it, it's really hard for you to make any sound heard. And if you don't have money, you can't even keep yourself nourished, let alone to fight against a totalitarian regime, right? So you have to have money, you would have to have a relationship. And the last thing is destroy one's reputation. So in order to make you a criminal suspect, they have to destroy who you are as a person. Okay, they have to completely creating a legitimate reasons for people to judge you, for people to hate you, for people to dislike you. So this is exactly what they do. So in order to do this successfully, there's two critical factors that they have to have a total control on, which is again propaganda. CCP's propaganda, all lies. There's no truth. If there's a truth, they're purposefully planted there to confuse you, to cloud your judgments, because the highest level of lie is to mix truth with lies. So you don't know whether they're lying or they're telling the truth. And the second one is the judicial corruption, as we mentioned previously, how corrupt the judicial system is. And this time we will, in this particular episode, I will still review it. But before we jump further to the case, I want Casey to play you a video. And this is a short clip I prepared for the show today, and it's from Stephen Bannon. Let's take a look.
With the Chinese Communist Party, that when she shows up at Davos, whether it's the Swiss or the Germans or the Italians or the English or the Americans, whoever I said, they're all kowtowing. Oh, she's fantastic. Wang Qishan, so great. They're so terrific. Every one of those societies, the vast majority of the people are good, decent, hardworking, God-fearing people. But it's that class on top, the elitists, who are they make all the money. Remember, the Chinese Communist Party, as a criminal enterprise, takes care of their criminal partners. It's like a mafia. It takes care of their criminal partners. So that's what has to be broken. That's kind of the message of Miles Guo to the West, is that this is not a government. This is not something that you guys talk about in the press and the media like they're legitimate. They're illegitimate. And their illegitimacy is what, and now we know that from Wang Qishan, remember, the word is out in Beijing that Wang Qishan, who's taking a little bit of a background, he spends almost 100% of his time on what topic? The core of legitimacy of the CCP and how to perpetuate that. One of the central fears of the CCP is the Chinese people, Lao Beijing, questioning their legitimacy for under 90 million people, and really just a couple of thousand factions, to basically control 1.4 billion people, the second most powerful economy in the world, the second most powerful military.
Okay, so thank you, Casey. So Mr. Bannon gets it. He sees what the CCP's true color is. It is a criminal enterprise. You know, they're worse than mafia. Okay, so they're worse than mafia. That's basically who they are. And, he mentioned a number about thousands of factions, but on the top, there's only 3 factions. Okay, in a dictatorship, there's not 1,000, but only 3. And maybe in the later of the show, I will digging deeper into those factions and how the internal struggle affect the rest of the world, affecting the peace-loving people. So as I mentioned to you, so the CCP would never tell you the truth. They only lie because, they lie to sustain themselves. They want to be seen and viewed as a legitimate government by its people. In order to do so, they have to lie because they control the free flow of information, because they're not a government that was elected by consent of the people. So they're not represent the people. They represent themselves and their sons and daughters and illegitimate sons and daughters. Okay, so that's basically the nature of the regime. So I think, Nicole did a fantastic interview with Stephen Bannon. So the short clips was just from every Wednesday. If you are interested in know more about the new federal state of China and whistleblower movement, I encourage you to tune in on the Wednesday Speaks with Stephen Bannon show that hosted by Nicole. So anyway, let's keep diving back to the PAX case. So I just reviewed a 3-step formula that the CCP has been using against any threat. Okay, regardless whether you're Chinese, although up to this present time, most of the threats coming from within. But if you are threats that overseas, they're using the same tactics. Okay, it's all with the 3 tactics because they basically can take down anyone. But you know what? I'm completely mesmerized by one person. That is Miles Guo. He's a true fighter. He has the spirit of the, fighting God, and he is still standing. And PAX case, let's go back to the PAX case. So PAX case used the same tactics if we actually looking at what PAX tactics has been. Okay, so take a look. So PAX case, on the top, the first tactics is discrediting Miles by repeatedly citing CCP's propaganda. Okay, repeatedly citing CCP's propaganda. if you're really having time and really interested in knowing about this case, there is about 1,200 documents on the docket, on the New York State Supreme Court. You can log in and you can see it. It's a free. It's a free. You can access it by the public, and you don't have to pay any money to look at it. So, but through all those written documents, a lot of memorandum of law, blah blah, stipulations, orders, they take every opportunity they have to discredit Miles. And this is very similar tactics that we observed that the CCP has been using during the last 5 years. As I go through the 2017, the significant events that recorded by the U.S.-China Security and Economic Committee in their Congress 2017 Congress report. So the reason why PAX is doing that is they have a very clear goal. The goal is very similar to what CCP wants to do to plant this in other people's minds, is to say, it is to establish a corrupted portrayal of Miles. Okay, so that's what their goal. And then the second tactics of PAX is they're misrepresenting facts and they're insinuating, innuendo. Trying to argue out of nothing is Miles's ill intention. So they argue Miles's intention. Okay, so when you established a biased portrayal of someone, okay, when you already planted that skewed image of someone in someone's minds, then if you are trying to argue, insinuating ill intention, likelihood you will success, because that person has already have a confirmation bias. So when you're adding on any information that confirmed the first information that they received, they were likely to agree with that. So PAX has done it throughout this proceeding, and their goal is very clear. They wanted to avoid merit discovery. Okay, so there's one thing I want to mention. So in the entire proceedings that gone through 5.5 years, Miles has not given time in the court, an open trial, to answer questions. Okay, so the only time he been depositioned, a number of times, 2 or 3 times, but on the court, he only said "I do" once, and during the 5.5 years, and he was barred from being cross-examined, telling the public the truth. Okay, and there are reasons why they want to do that. They don't want a discovery, because this whole thing, this contract, the loan agreement, the personal guarantee, everything they mentioned about happening in 2008 is fake, is forgered. Okay, it's falsified documents. And later on, I will go back to that point. But so now you just remember it's a fake documents. So if you're fake, what you're afraid? You're afraid of being challenged. You're afraid of details, because when details comes out, you're exposed. So that is why they don't want merit discovery. They're trying to avoid the merit discovery as much as they can. And then the third tactics of PAX is accusing Miles of misconduct. Okay, so usually, the Chinese CCP, the most corrupted leader on the top, are calling for anti-corruption. Okay, so this is what we have been seeing and observing. But PAX is using the same tactics. Their lawyer is arguing that Miles is trying to, evade the debt. He had never had intention. He trying to hide the assets and accusing Miles of misconduct. But truly, who is hiding the assets? Who is embezzling the trillions of Chinese people's money? The CCP. And what they're doing, they have been doing this for years, and they have been dancing and in bed with the Wall Street, with the London financial tycoons, with whoever willing to work with them for decades. And that is truly the kleptocracy that we see right now. And people are no longer willing to be fooled. That is why we have whistleblower movement happened in 2017, January 26, led by Miles Guo. So their tactics is accusing Miles of misconduct. So the criminal accused a good person of committing crime. Okay, just hold that thoughts. The reason why they want to do that is they wanted to achieve their goal. What is that? Precluding Miles' deposition testimony. Okay, so as I said, they don't want Miles to testify. They don't want Miles to testify in court because nobody can refute what Miles has to say. With no credible witness, with no credible evidence, admissible evidence, they cannot defeat Miles because he is the one that is telling the truth the whole time. Okay, so they want the judge make the order to preclude Miles's deposition testimony, okay, which Miles claimed that the documents are fake. The contractual arrangements that claimed by the PACs who started the initial complaint are forged documents, are falsified evidences. Okay, so the last part is go after Miles' money. Familiar? Because we just talked about the 3 steps that CCP is using to eliminate any threats. Throughout this whole thing, you can see that really PACs is imitating what CCP has done to Miles. So they actually I have exactly the dates. And if you're interested in looking at the dockets, as I said, there's a 1,200 documents on the New York State, Supreme Court of New York State. They had filed 3 times a memorandum of laws to request an order of prejudgment attachments. Okay, so the first one came in 2018, April 24th, docket number 123. The second one, so the first one was denied, by the way. The first one was denied by the judge. And the second second request to order pre-attachment judgment happened on 2018, November 28th, docket number 250. And then the last request happened on 2019, January 18th, and the docket number is 272. All 3 of them has been denied. Okay, so all 3 of this request for order of prejudgment attachments has been denied. Okay, let's take a look at the legal concept. What is, you might be confused, what is a prejudgment attachment? Let's take a look. So I have a slides here that's saying that. So a prejudgment attachment allows a plaintiff to seize and safeguard the defendant's assets before a judgment is entered. Because an attachment significantly impairs parties' property rights before being found liable, the law attempts to balance the right of the defendant to be heard in court before losing property with the risk that the plaintiff will be left with no way to collect on the judgment. So that's called prejudge attachment. So here it says, have to balance. It's a balance test you do, right? You have to balance the right of the defendant to be heard and also before losing it, and also the risk the plaintiff will be left with no money to collect. Okay. So in this case, as I mentioned, Miles Guo has never been heard in court. Okay. Because PACs and its counsel has using a tactics. They want everything to expedite. They don't want a discovery. They want a fast go. I want a summary judgment. I want a prejudgment attachment. I don't want a merit discovery. You figure why they don't want truth to come out, why they urge the court and urge the judge to go faster. And then they take every opportunity to defame Miles and destroy his reputation. And you figure. So this is so much about the prejudgment attachment. But one of the reasons at the end, although they didn't success for prejudgment attachment out of 3 attempts, but they success only 4 attempts, which they did get attached Miles's assets, the 18th floor and the boat. This is where the next piece comes to critical. This is a second disappearing witness, because one of the reasons, there are a couple of reasons, and in the later shows I will mention them. And one of the reasons the PACs managed to convince the court, the judge, is Miles has an ill intention. He purposefully misrepresented himself, and therefore his testimony, Your Honor, you have to disregard his testimony because he's contradictory to himself. He doesn't even know what he's saying. That's why he's not trustworthy. You can't use his testimony in the court. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why. This is where the discrepancy comes. And this comes to the second disappearing witness in this Miles and PACs case, Fiona Yu. In last episode, we talked about Qu Guojiao. She's gone. Nobody knows where her whereabouts. Okay, she used to be a family associate working for Miles's trust families. family trust. So she handles a lot of transfers and money going in and going out, but she's gone. And the second person that is gone is Fiona Yu. So according to this documents, you can find it as a docket number 11, and was submitted by PAX in 2017, June 29th. So it's very early on of this case. So in this document, they attached a affirmation of Fiona Yu. Okay, so who is Fiona Yu? Let's take up the slides. I have it here. So Fiona Yu was the contact person for Beijing Pangu Investment. As I mentioned, it was one of the business entities owned by by Guo's family. And then remember the 3 employees that was trialed by the CCP that forced to admit that they committed a crime, forced to buy Miles Guo. So that's the same company they work for. So Fiona Yu was was a contact person, but according to the legal proceeding documents, the same documents that I mentioned, docket 11, that she was a contact person, because it's written right here. And it's say in support of defendant's motion to dismiss. Okay, so Fiona Yu made this affirmation and affidavit. So I'm just going to read it for you guys. It says, I submit this affirmation in support of Ms. Guo's motion to dismiss the complaint of plaintiff Pacific Alliance Asia Opportunity Funds, short for the short is PAX. And I made this affirmation based upon my personal knowledge and my review of my records relating to the loan facility entered into between Spirit Charter Investment Limited and PAX on or about April 4th, 2018. Okay, so a contact person made an affirmation at the time in 2017 saying that I reviewed the loan agreement signed in between Spirit Charter Investment and PAX, and they're real. Therefore, I affirm that, I know that, and this is it. Okay, so and PAX submitted that affirmation. So PAX initially elicited that affirmation and then submitted affirmation as to the court. Okay. So let's take a next. What's happened in the case is, as I mentioned in the previous episode, is after in 2017. Okay, in 2017, when PAX firstly lodged the complaint, the case was dismissed. Okay, because at that time, Miles's lawyer arguing on the grounds of foreign non-convenience. So if you have followed this series of episodes, you would know what is foreign non-convenience, right? It's a legal ground that you can dismiss a case, a plaintiff brought against the defendant because the jurisdiction that you currently right now is not the right jurisdiction to trial this case, because somewhere else there's alternative court, alternative jurisdiction that's more suitable for trying this case. So this case in the first year was dismissed by Judge Ostriger in New York Superior Court. Okay. Because our argument was very strong, okay, based on the non-foreign non-convenience legal ground. So the next slide, I have it here. So let's jump to the next slide. I will explain the reason. And then Guo's prior counsel filed a motion. Okay, so we all know Miles had throughout proceeding changed quite a bit of law firms. The very first law firm was a pretty famous law firm, but let's not going that way. But Guo's prior counsel filed a motion to dismiss the case on foreign non-convenience in 2017. This is what I just said. And the relevant factors favored dismissal at the time. And that was right, because it turned out the judge did, dismiss the case. The counsel submitted an affirmation it's not PAX submitted, the counsel submitted. So Miles Guo's prior counsel submitted this affirmation from Fiona Yu. The purpose of Yu's affirmation was to demonstrate that the alleged transaction given rise to PAX claim occurred in and were governed by a foreign jurisdiction, and that documents and witness likewise were located in that foreign jurisdiction. So the purpose for the prior counsel to submit Fiona Yu, to solicit Fiona Yu's affirmation and submit it, is because they want to establish, they want to give evidence to their arguments, which is a foreign non-convenience, okay? So in the context of that motion, where the court had to accept as true the allegations in the tax complaint. So basically, when the counsel submitted the argument saying you should dismiss the case, it's a foreign non-convenience, and I have Fiona Yu, who is a contact person for Pangu investment company, attested. So the court would have so Pax arguing the court would have to accept that whatever the contract at the time between Springy Charter and Pax was authentic. Okay, so in the context of that, the court has to in order to make a ruling and order against or for the foreign non-convenience, the court has to take as it is. So let's take a next slide. Here it says very clear. This is a document that you will find. It's a docket number 390. And it was an argument brought by Miles's lawyer after Miles's testimony. Okay, sorry, not testimony, a deposition. Okay, so into 2020. So in this document, it explained. So let's start with the first sentence to say, since the time her affirmation, her means Fiona Yu, was submitted, Yu, like many other who have had business or personal connections to Guo, Guo is Guo basically, has disappeared. Okay, so she again is disappeared after submitted the affirmation. The very important key witness gone again. And this is not just one person gone, there's two people gone. It probably has more that we don't know yet. And as such, it is not possible to ask her where she obtained the documents annexed to her affirmation. So when she signed the affirmation saying, yeah, I reviewed the loan facilities between Shiny Charter and Pax, in what circumstances? Okay, she cannot be questioned and asked because she simply is gone. So what is clear from Guo's testimony, that's a testimony I just referred to. However, Mr. Guo said he had not read the affirmation submitted by Yu prior to it being shown to him at his deposition. Okay, in the later shows, I will read some of the information coming from Guo to the audiences, but today I'm not going to do it. And we only have limited time left, so I'm just going to speed it up. So nor does Mr. Guo know how the documents annexed to Yu's affirmation came to be in her possession or were used by his prior counsel in connection with the foreign non-convenience motion, again, because he cannot read English. At a minimum, this creates a question of fact as to whether the documents annexed to Yu's affirmation were authentic. That's a legitimate question because there are a lot of suspicious places in this case. Why are those ladies that worked for Miles are gone? Because they could be a critical witness, and testifying everything could be falsified, and they didn't even see, under what circumstances. Maybe they were being threatened. Maybe their family was captured and kidnapped. These are all very usual tactics that CCP would use when they're hunting someone. Right? But she's gone. She simply is vanished. Okay, so the question still remains though, right? So is the document legitimate? As I mentioned, the highest form of lie is to mix truth with lies. So you don't know whether it's completely lie or you kind of a freeze because you don't know what to do because some of them are true, some of them are not true. So you kind of are not sure how to dissect the information, right? And only picking up those one is true. When it comes to contract, not all the contracts are fake, but some of them definitely a forgery with not Miles' signature because Miles has testified repeatedly and being asked the question repeatedly. And he affirmatively said, it is not my signature. Okay. So, and we know Mr. Guo only tells the truth. So this bears the question, which documents are fake? Which signatures are fake? This is a fair question to be asked, but the New York court never gave Miles Guo the opportunity to challenge that because they went into a summary judgment. Everything has to be done faster. They don't want to marry discovery. They don't want anything. They don't want to question, basically. They don't want to cross-examine Miles Guo, and they want a done deal and seal the case and after Miles Guo's money. Okay, so let's take a look at the last slide. I want to end the show there. So in the last show, we talk about the Chinese rule by law. right? We went through quite a bit Xi Jinping thoughts in the previous shows. If you follow, you will know what I'm talking about. What is rule by law and what is rule of law, and the distinctions between these two, concept. And we introduced some of the things that we see, and it's widely spread and widely used within the corrupted judicial system back in communist China. The 5 tactics, although these are not exclusive, far from exhausted lists of what they do, but these are most common things that they do. Okay, and falsified evidence is one of them. Because we've spent 2 episodes talking about kidnapping, disappearing witnesses, and we reviewed there's 2 key witnesses in this case are missing. Okay, and today we mentioned about the falsifying evidences, and in the next show, I'm going to talk about the falsified evidences, and at least that question has to be asked by someone, and I'm hoping the U.S. court, there will be a U.S. court, there will be a judge that is willing to listen to the answers to that question. Okay, so I'm remaining hopeful, and I think we're about the time to end the show today. And so I hope you enjoyed the show, and we will come back with our next episode with more information about this Pax and Miles's case. And thank you, Casey, for your help and support today. And thank you, the audiences, for tuning in and spend an hour also with me today. So I see you next episode. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
大家知道这个郭先生最近几天经常提到这个人啊，叫张松桥。那么之前他是来自于重庆，那么后来去了香港定居，成了香港一个商人，号称重庆李嘉诚。那么他是江曾王孟这一系的一个白手套。那么首先我们先看一下，我画了一张非常非常简单的这个关系图啊，看看这个张松桥在这个关系图中扮演什么角色。他当然是一个这个张曾这个系的白手套，那么他和广州富力的这个张力还有许家印，这都是白手套。他们这个的视频里郭先生已经讲得很清楚了，他们这些人通过澳门的赌场把钱洗到海外去。那么去海外买有2个重点的地方，一个是英国，一个是澳大利亚。那么说到英国呢，肯定就是伦敦了，他们在这个伦敦是他们花钱的一个重点的地方，而澳门赌场又是完全是在孟建柱手下，所以这是一条他们这个洗钱或者是把钱弄到海外去转移资产的一个重要的线路。左边这3个人，最上面的这位就是张松桥，那么中间的这个就是广州富力的老板叫张力，郭先生直播也多次提到。下面这个许家印大家都很熟悉了，就这3个人。那么他们都是这个一个系列的。那么今天重点的人物就是我们来讲一讲这个张松桥。